Welcome to the Health Headliner podcast by Tudu Digital. Our content is informational only and not medical advice. Please consult your provider. Now, let's dive into today's headlines.
You know that weird wrinkling your fingers get after a long bath or maybe a swim? We all see it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And the quick thought is probably just, your skin soaking up water like a sponge.
That's what most people think, definitely.
But today, we're plunging into some really fascinating science that reveals those pruny fingers. They're actually part of a much more active, kind of interesting process than just simple swelling.
That's exactly right. Forget the idea of skin just puffing up. This wrinkling, it's actually a signal. It's coming from your body's command center, the nervous system, and it's orchestrating this, well, subtle but pretty significant change.
Okay, so it's more complex than it looks.
Much more. We've been looking at a compelling health news piece from Medical Express and also a really detailed scientific paper. That one's in the Journal of the Mechanical Behavior of Biomedical Materials.
Right.
And they help us get the real story here. So our goal really is to uncover the mechanism, the true mechanism behind these water wrinkles and, what this seemingly minor thing can tell us about how our bodies actually work.
Okay, let's dive straight into that research then. This work, it comes from a team at Binghamton University, part of SUNY, right? State University of New York, led by Guy German.
That's the one.
And apparently it all kicked off with a really insightful question from one of his students. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. They'd done some work before, I think back in 2023, but then a student wondered, does the pattern of wrinkles that forms, on your fingers, is it always the same pattern?
Huh. It seems so simple, but I guess no one had really checked it rigorously.
Apparently not. It's funny how those everyday observations can spark real science.
Totally.
Yeah.
So how did they actually test that? What did the participants have to do?
Well, the method was straightforward but clever. They had people soak their fingers, just one hand, I think, in water for 30 minutes.
Okay, half an hour.
Yeah.
Then what?
Afterwards, they took very detailed photographs of the wrinkled fingers. Then, and this is the key bit, they had the same people come back at least 24 hours later and do the exact same thing again. Soak for 30 minutes, photograph the wrinkles.
Gotcha. So 2 sets of wrinkly finger photos taken on different days. How did they compare them? Just eyeball it.
Well, they did do a visual comparison, yes, to see if the sort of general layout of the wrinkles looks similar.
Makes sense.
But they also went further. They used computer analysis. They basically mapped out the lines and shapes, vectorized the wrinkles, as the paper says.
Okay, getting technical.
Yeah, and then they used a mathematical technique, normalized dotted products, I believe, to quantitatively compare the orientation and structure of these wrinkles between the 2 time points. Much more objective than just looking.
Right, so proper data-driven comparison. And what was the big reveal? Were the patterns the same?
That was the key finding, yes.
Yeah.
The same basic pattern, the raised loops and ridges, it consistently appeared both times for each person, which strongly suggests that how our fingers wrinkle in water, it's not random at all, it's quite structured.
So not just random puckering.
Exactly. And based on this consistency, plus other evidence, the researchers concluded that these wrinkles are actually caused by our blood vessels contracting under the skin.
Ah, vasoconstriction.
Precisely, vasoconstriction, not the skin just absorbing water and swelling up.
That really does flip the common understanding on its head.
Yeah.
How did they link it specifically to blood vessels, though? Was it just the pattern consistency?
Well, the consistency was a big clue. But the paper also mentions that earlier research, actually going way back, like the 1930s, had already started questioning the simple swelling idea.
Oh, really? That long ago?
Yeah, and a more recent study in 2016 also challenged that theory. But this new work adds more weight. And crucially, they made this really interesting observation about people who had damage to a specific nerve in their fingers, the median nerve.
Ah, yes, I saw that in the news article. What happened with those individuals?
Well, the researchers found that if someone had damage to that median nerve, their fingers just didn't develop the typical wrinkles after being soaked in water.
No wrinkles at all.
Or significantly reduced, yeah. Which is a huge clue, right? Because it tells you the nervous system has to be involved. It's not just a passive skin thing.
Right, because if it were just waterlogging the skin, nerve damage shouldn't really affect it.
Exactly. There's an active biological process happening.
So the nervous system is pulling the strings here.
Precisely. And specifically, it's the autonomic nervous system. That's the part that handles all the automatic stuff we don't consciously control. Breathing, heart rate, digestion, and importantly here, making blood vessels constrict or relax.
Okay, okay. So can you walk us through the steps? How does water on the fingers trigger this whole autonomic response leading to wrinkles?
Sure. So when your hands or feet, too, are underwater for a bit, water starts moving into the very top layer of your skin. It does this mainly through your sweat ducts.
Ah, through the sweat pores.
Exactly. Now, this influx of water changes the local environment within the skin. Specifically, it lowers the concentration of salts there.
Okay, less salty inside the skin cells.
Right. And this change in salt balance acts like a trigger. It activates nerve endings, sending signals up to the brain. The brain processes this, and the autonomic nervous system responds by telling the tiny blood vessels, the capillaries, in your fingers and toes to constrict to get narrower.
Got it. So water in, salt balance changes, nerves fire, brain signals back, blood vessels shrink. How does that shrinking cause the wrinkles on the surface, though?
Okay, so imagine the tissue just beneath the outer skin layer. As those blood vessels constrict, the volume of blood flowing through decreases, and the overall volume of that underlying tissue actually shrinks slightly.
Right.
But the surface area of the skin itself, the epidermis, it doesn't shrink immediately along with it. So you've got this outer layer that's now slightly too big for the shrunken foundation underneath.
Ah, so it has to buckle.
Exactly. It buckles and folds inward, creating those wrinkles. The analogy Guy German uses, which is pretty good, is like a grape drying out and becoming a raisin. The inside shrinks, but the skin folds up because it has nowhere else to go.
That raisin analogy really helps visualize it. So these wrinkles aren't just some like random side effect. There must be some bigger implications if our body is actively doing this, right?
Absolutely, and the implications are quite varied and interesting. The Health News article really highlights the potential application in forensics.
Forensics, how so?
Well, because these wrinkle patterns seem to be consistent and repeatable for an individual over time, Guy German suggests they could potentially be used almost like underwater fingerprints to help identify bodies recovered from water.
Wow.
He even mentioned his father was a police officer and sometimes dealt with difficult identification cases involving water immersion, so it's a very practical thought.
That is really unexpected. Using wrinkles for ID, what other implications are there?
Well, the scientific paper talks about something called the water-induced finger wrinkle test, or FWT.
FWT, what's that used for?
It's actually a test used sometimes in medicine already. Doctors use it to assess how well someone's autonomic nervous system is functioning, particularly the peripheral parts. They basically time how long it takes for wrinkles to appear and how intense they are.
Oh, interesting. So it's a diagnostic tool.
Yeah. And this new research showing that the patterns themselves are consistent could potentially add another layer to that test. Maybe analyzing the specific pattern could give even more detailed information about nerve function or health.
So it's not just if you wrinkle, but how you wrinkle might be important diagnostically.
That's cool.
And what about the original reason? Why did we even evolve this response? Is there a benefit?
It seems so, yes. There's research, including a study from 2021 that's mentioned in the paper, suggesting that this wrinkling actually improves our grip on wet objects.
Like treads on a tire.
Kinda, yeah. The wrinkles might act like channels to funnel water away from the contact points between your skin and the object, allowing for a more secure hold.
That makes sense.
So, for our ancestors, maybe gathering food in wet environments, or holding on to wet tools, or even just walking on slippery rocks underwater, having that improved grip could have been a real advantage, a survival edge, perhaps.
Fascinating. Something we see as just, pruny fingers might actually be an evolved adaptation for better grip. Wild.
Yeah.
Now, with any study, there are always limitations, right? Things to keep in mind. What about this one?
That's a very important point, yeah. The researchers are upfront about this, too. Firstly, the study involved a relatively small number of participants.
Okay.
So while the findings about pattern consistency are strong for that group, more research with larger, more diverse populations would definitely be needed to confirm these findings are universally applicable.
Makes sense. Anything else?
Also, the study really focused on the consistency of the overall pattern. It didn't necessarily drill down into, say, very fine details or subtle variations that might still exist within those patterns each time someone wrinkles.
Right, so the big picture map is the same, but maybe tiny roads change slightly.
Something like that, yeah. And finally, remember the conditions were specific. 30 minutes in water, presumably at a standard temperature. Different immersion times, or maybe different water temperatures, or even salinity, could potentially influence how the wrinkles form, and this study didn't explore all those variables.
Okay, so good foundational work, but still room for more investigation. What about the researchers themselves? Any, key takeaways or interesting points they emphasized?
Well, reading the news article, Guy German's enthusiasm really comes across. He seems genuinely excited about skin science. He used this great analogy saying he feels like a kid in a candy store because there's still so much to learn about skin.
I like that. Shows passion.
Definitely. And he really highlighted their finding about the blood vessels. The fact that their positions under the skin seem relatively stable over time. That's key to why the wrinkle patterns are repeatable.
Right, the underlying structure dictates the surface folds.
Exactly. And he also stressed again that observation about the median nerve damage, how important that is for proving it's not just water absorption, because, like we said, if it was just waterlogging, nerve damage wouldn't stop it. The nervous system has to be involved.
Yeah, that point really drives home the active mechanism.
And the scientific paper itself does a good job placing this in context, referencing that earlier work from the 1930s and the 2016 study that had already started chipping away at the old swelling theory.
It's amazing how science builds like that, isn't it? Revisiting old questions with new tools and perspectives.
Absolutely.
So as we kind of wrap up our deep dive into the world of pruny fingers, what's maybe one thing you'd want listeners to think about next time they see those wrinkles?
Well, maybe next time you're in the bath or pool and you notice your fingers wrinkling, actually take a second to look closely at the pattern. See if you recognize it from last time.
Become your own finger wrinkle scientist.
Ah, yeah. But seriously, it's a neat little everyday reminder of this complex autonomic nervous system working away in the background. It might make you curious about all the other incredible things that system is doing constantly without you even noticing.
That's a great thought. Connect it back to our own bodies. And it really does make you wonder, doesn't it? If these underwater fingerprints are unique and repeatable, could there be other uses? Beyond forensics, things we haven't even considered.
It's definitely provocative, isn't it? Who knows what other applications might emerge?
For sure. So, just to sum up then, those wrinkly fingers, not just skin getting waterlogged, it's actually a pretty sophisticated response.
Yeah, driven by your nervous system constricting blood vessels, leading to these surprisingly consistent individual patterns that might even give you a better grip.
Amazing stuff hidden in plain sight. Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We hope you found this look into the science of pruny fingers as intriguing as we did.
Hope so.
We'll be back soon with another deep dive, exploring more of the fascinating science happening all around us.
Thanks for tuning in to the Health Headliner podcast by To Digital. Like and subscribe for more health news and breakthroughs. Stay healthy and informed. See you next time.